There are very few things in this world that can't be solved with a fireball. Hello, my fellow true souls. How are you doing? I hope the answer is fantastically as you enjoy, savor, and take in this mesmerizing world that is Baldurs Gate 3. And if, like me, you have chosen correctly the best class or are thinking of doing so in Sorcerer, then this is everything you need to know from the very moment you press create character all the way to level 5 as you progress through Act 1 and get to grips with what's good and what's goodn't. Why did I not just say not? Why did I try and turn good into a negative word? In this class, its subclasses, and its vast array of spells and options. So, Sorcerer itself as a whole then. It is a powerful class, able to pump out absurd amounts of damage per turn, while backing that up with a varied arsenal of utility defensives that let you be surprisingly hard to kill and surprisingly effective in melee combat with a big old stabby spear. For example, your options are many when you pick this as a naturally gifted manipulator of the weave. The whole point of Sorcerer is born with magic over, the silly wizards that have to learn it, poor them. And that is expressed through your ability to modify spells as the main core hook here. All the subclasses do this, and it is your meta magic. Being able to alter a cast to suit your current needs, being able to extend the length that you can send something, casting a usually one target spell on multiple targets, making a spell cast faster, so what usually would take your whole turn is just a bonus action to rapid fire off a flurry of death. You really feel like a multi-tool of magic, a skeleton key to unlock the door to any fight with what you can bring to the table, with some of the most powerful buffs in the game, both for your allies and yourself, and the ability to get around the battlefield very quickly and efficiently. You're going to feel like you have control of a lot of things here. Yes, ultimately you are squishy in the classes, despite having plenty of ways to mitigate that, and you're not going to be there charging in on the front lines, but as I said, that doesn't mean you're useless once enemies get next to you. In fact, that might prove to be a big mistake for them. Big amounts of area of effect damage come into play here too. Obviously, a lot of this stuff is from being able to choose from the spell pools, so applies to a lot of the wizard's choices and a few other classes that do overlap the options for casting available in the universe of D&D, but I think there is no more better wielder, or at least no more suited jack of all trades than the Sorcerer, and getting to use all of the flashy, fun, really pretty looking magic is definitely a bonus too. You can build the class in lots of different ways to suit your ideal companions. You don't have to just be sat on the back line throwing out fireballs, but let me tell you, there is nothing quite as satisfying as doing that, if it's the kind of thing you're into. But before we do jump in, it should be said that you will unlock Withers here early in Act 1. He's hard to miss, and when you do, he will give you the opportunity to respec. It only costs 100 gold, and it is a full true respec. It will reset you back to level 1, and you can, literally become anything. I could lose my mind and decide to instead be a Tempest Domain Cleric for some reason. And yes, while it puts you to level 1, as soon as you are done here, you will level up to the level you were and can redo all your level ups. So don't ever worry about committing to something too hard. Feel free to experiment, because changing your mind, thankfully, isn't anywhere near as harsh as it is in actual D&D. So before we look at cantrips and spells, let's talk subclasses. Storm Sorcery, which I personally consider to be the weakest, though I should preface all of this by saying if you just feel an affinity towards one of the three, then go for it. It's a role-playing game after all. But while the ability to fly gives you unparalleled mobility and repositioning on the battlefield, it's kind of all it does. You do later gain the ability to blast extra lightning damage on multiple enemies, but it just sort of pales compared to the advantages gained by the other two. And Wild Magic is next, as to me the middle child of the three, as Tides of Chaos is unabashedly fantastic. A forced advantage on essentially anything of your choice whenever you want once per day can quite literally be life-saving. The cost of that, though, is you increase the chance of a non-cantrip spell doing some wild shenanigans, rolling the chaos table of effects, and, well, anything could happen. You could just summon a puddle of water, you could heal all of your enemies, and it can happen at the worst possible moment, and you could not have a way of dealing with the consequences. Or it could be a happy bonus, and now everyone's dead that you wanted to be. And it's fun. It's shenanigans, especially in multiplayer if that's your thing, but I still think it isn't quite as just consistently useful as Draconic Bloodline. This is probably your I just want to be powerful kind of all the time, really. I don't need it to be crazy flashy. And it really does give you that smoothing out of the normal weaknesses of Sorcerer. This gives you extra health and makes it so at minimum your AC will be 13. This lets you not die all the time on an otherwise squishy class. It's what lets you be at the front. It's what lets you use melee weaponry when you don't want to burn spell slots on weaker enemies, and you also don't want to just be throwing cantrips out every turn because that's both anticlimactic and not that effective. It lets you actually fill a more hybrid role and go in many different directions, and that's really nice stacked on top of a certain group of spells. So I have gone Dragon Ancestor, and then you have to choose your Dragon Ancestor. Generally speaking, Fire is the min-max's choice when it comes to which one. At levels 1 through 3, I would go for Red Dragon to get Burning Hands. A potently damaging early game AoE is really nice to have, and then from level 4 onwards, respec into Brass, as you will no longer need this extra damage help. You have better damaging spells to pick from, like Fireball, and then Brass keeps you with that fire, but instead gets you a bit more utility in Sleep. It's not crazy, but it's there. And it also means you can become resistant to fire damage, which is one of the most common and potent types of damage in the game, which is really nice from level 6 onwards. And then Lightning is pretty decent too, if you are a fan of the blue. Witch Bolt is a nice bonus to get early on. It lets you do consistent damage without burning more than one spell slot. We will get into spell slot usage, of course. And then you have the extra aesthetic that lets you put scales on your face, which is pretty cool too. Cantrips then. These are you cast them as many times as you want. They're weak, but a lot of the times they can be useful. So a mistake here is to just have too many offensive cantrips. A lot of them aren't going to do that well for you once you start leveling up a bit and get access to more options, and there are better ways to do free damage. That said, if you don't have Firebolt from a different source, I've got it from my race, then you do want to get Firebolt, especially as a fire ancestor. It is the most damaging on average cantrip, and a good bit of backup long-range damage to have access to. For your other slots then, I recommend Ray of Frost, and that alongside Firebolt will make up your 2 damaging cantrips. Being able to slow enemies down is nice, but it also gives you access to a different type of damage, which is useful. After that, well, the choice is a little bit more free. I like getting Blade Ward, as just not dying for a couple turns can be really useful, especially early on before, again, you get more options. Mage Hand is, of course, nice to pick stuff up at range, and the general cheekiness you can do with it. It's always nice to have access to a light, so I would keep that with you in certain places around the world, and then you're still left with a kind of choice of whatevers to pick from. I do like Minor Illusion though, as you can get a little bit clever with it, especially when you're sneaking places or need to distract someone, and it just gives you a bit of utility. And utility, as you'll come to see, is a big deal focus for your spells, as piling on damaging options just isn't necessary. When it comes to your level 1 spell selection then, one choice is easy. Magic Missile. Get Magic Missile. The ability to do guaranteed damage in 99% of circumstances without any rolls of the dice is so needed and useful. There might be a key target who's on low health and you cannot risk this last turn you'll get to kill them before something goes disastrously wrong going wrong. And this gives you that security. And it's so good. It lets you hit things from weird angles and awkward ranges. It lets you hit multiple targets at once. When you cast it at higher levels, you can add a missile to really hammer the point home, and you just gain too much from being able to do this. Your second one then, well, if you've got Burning Hands from your Dragon Ancestor, then you are good offensively, and I would take something a little bit more useful. If you want more damage, Thunder Wave is really nice to get a bit of space, knocking enemies away or into lava or off cliffs, but if you don't feel that you need it, then something like False Life is pretty good, giving yourself a bump of extra health that will just last as you go into a fight. Or Witch Bolt, and by Witch Bolt I mean this bolt, because Witch Bolt is a good way to get a lot of damage out of a few spell slots early on, but it's not something I would keep long term past even level 3. A little bit of extra dashing is nice to get yourself out of sticky situations, but really at level 1 the extras aren't too critical, but I do like False Life. If you aren't Draconic Ancestor, then Mage Armor is really good too, but Draconic Ancestor means you don't have to worry about it. So, at level 2, you unlock your class feature that is Meta Magic. This is so potent. And I'm just going to grab Enhanced Leap, as being able to jump further does actually get you to a lot of secret areas in the game. Disguise Self is also fun too, for a few NPC reactions and generally being sneaky. So, Meta Magic then. For now, you have to choose 2 of these 4. I think the choices here are pretty kinda succinct. Careful Spell lets you do things like throw a fireball at a group of enemies that your allies are also stood next to. They will save the throw, take half damage, but that's not the best way, really. You can just carefully place the fireball to make that not a requirement. Distant, however, is really cool. Being able to melee spell with a range of 9 meters is very useful, but being able to have a massively long range snipe of a shot does come in handy fairly often, especially on a fleeing enemy as they go to alert the guards, and you're going to be happy that you have this. It's a good one to take. Extended Spell is also really nice to take, as it will double buffs and summons, I mean, as you can see, and that means you just don't have to cast them again for the entire fight, though a lot of them last long enough that you probably won't have to do this anyway. But basically your first choice is, do you want long range or longer lasting? Both you can make arguments for, but I will go distant. Then, Twinned Spell. This definitely needs to be one of your choices. The ability to hit 2 targets with a spell that can normally only hit 1 cannot be understated. This is not just good for damaging 2 enemies at once, it is also fantastic for buffs. If you can give an ally a magical what's-it-madooey that makes them stronger, and then you can also give a second ally that is a huge increase in your party's combat power, and one specific use of this is probably the single most potent thing the Sorcerer can do, just full stop, at least in the first sort of 8 levels or so, and we will get to that. Then, each time you level up, you can take a spell out, and you can put a different spell in if you found you're not using it or not needing it, and want something different, so use that to modify your current arsenal. Then, at level 3, we get to our second level spells. This is where the choice gets a little bit more interesting. You can amp up the damage by getting something like Scorching Ray, which is very potent, especially single target, or if you want something a little bit more utility-based, I would definitely recommend Misty Step as soon as possible. Being able to bonus action, teleport really far away, up and down ledges, lets you get to places quickly and get away from enemies quickly. It's free, doesn't trigger attacks of opportunity, and as a bonus action means you can still blast something off or do some stabbing when you arrive. The get out of jail free card this offers cannot be understated, and it's definitely something I would always get. Next up, I would get Blur. Every enemy having disadvantage on attacks against you is evidently really good. Yes, it's concentration, so if they do get through and you fail the roll, it will drop the buff, but them getting through is obviously twice as hard now because they have disadvantage. And this, along with your draconic toughness, lets you again be quite hard to actually bring down, and is definitely something I recommend over just taking more damaging spells. Invisibility, yep, always nice. People stop hitting you, you can go places without being seen. The RPG gameability of this cannot be overstated, but it's also something you can get from other places like magic items, so a spell slot on it isn't strictly necessary. Everything else is a little bit more situational, and it isn't something you need to rush to have, though Hold Person can be quite good CC as well. Then we get to choose our next passive, and it is this point where there really is kind of only one choice. Yes, heightened, making it so your spell's more likely to do its full effect, because they have disadvantage on the saving throw is neat. The subtle to break through silenced, but you're not going to be silenced very often. You really can't do better than quickened. Letting you do a bonus action spell, so you still have your action to use, so you can have a really potent turn, is one of the most potent things the Sorcerer has going for it. Quickened spell is just it. Then we go to level 4, where we get our first feat choice, which is obviously quite the choice for every class once you get to level 4. We also can put in an extra cantrip, so at this point just grab a little bit more utility. I will give myself Mage Hand so I can do what that needs to do. You don't really need another form of damage here. And then grab your next level 2 spell. In this case, as I said, I'm getting Blur. Replacement-wise, as we've been going ideally, there's nothing I really need to here, but again, customize as you go, depending on what you need, what you use, what you don't use. Feat then. There is a long, big list of feats to choose from, all of them quite fun, a lot of them very powerful, and many very interesting. Such as, for example, Warcaster. That can be quite nice. You can do a reaction attack with a spell, and you can get advantage on concentration, so you don't drop them, so you can keep Blur up, for example. This is really cool. But nothing competes with a simple ability improvement. On a Sorcerer, you want your spellcasting modifier, that is Charisma, to be as high as it can physically be. There is no other decision to make here. Pump your Charisma. We'll talk next feat about more options when that comes along, but for now, just improve Charisma. Then we get to level 5, which is about where you'll end up at the end of Act 1, and this is where things get real exciting, because we get to choose our first level 3 spell, and here is very powerful options. Fireball, you've heard of it, you've seen the meme that it is, but it's that for a reason. It is big damage, big AoE, and you cannot go wrong with burning a 3rd level spell on this raw damage. See, the thing is, something like Lightning Bolt is also just as good, but a line is generally worse than a circle, but you've got to think about your spell slot usage. You can only do 2 level 3 spells a day, so if you just blast off 2 fireballs, well, you're done. That was good damage, you might have won the fight, but what about the next fight? You can't be long resting between every fight. So, if we then replace spell, we can now get rid of an unneeded lower spell, for example, like Enhanced Leap or False Life here. I will probably choose False Life, and then we can now put in another level 3 as we've unlocked that tier. Take Haste. There is no competition. Haste is so good. In a game like D&D or Baldurs Gate 3, where you have fairly limited actions you can take on each turn, then being able to gain an extra action is so potent. And 10 turns is a long time. You want this buff, not necessarily just for yourself, but put it on your companions, on your fighters, your barbarians, your rogues. They will absolutely adore you as they start shredding through enemies with all of these extra attacks. Then, past that, you have a few other generally neat level 3s. Slow is quite a good buff. Flight is very useful, but not something you need to rush for. Definitely the 2 best level 3 spells are Haste and Fireball, and that's what I heartily recommend. So, we're level 5, we've chosen the best spells, we're the best subclass, we are ready to go. Let me cut right to the chase then and show you the single most potent thing the Sorcerer can do, arguably just at any point. So if we enter our turn-based mode then, and get someone like Lae'zel here, well, they're a level 5 fighter at this point, which means that in one single turn, they can attack twice. That's really nice. But if we give them haste, well, you can see where that goes. But it goes even further than that. So if we take our twinned spell, we grab haste, we give it to both our barbarian and our fighter. Now for 10 turns as we enter turn-based mode, they are both hasted, which means they can attack once, they can attack twice, they can attack thrice, they can attack 4 times a turn each, for 10 turns, because we have twin spelled boosted them with haste. And something like Reckless Attack, where you have advantage on all your attack rolls until your next turn, 4 advantaged attack rolls per turn for 10 turns on your melee guys. Yes, it's nice to have it on yourself so you can fire off 2 high-level spells in a turn, but that's really not the best use. Twin spell, haste your melee guys, and just let them clean up. It is unbelievably potent. After that, then, you are just generally setting up in an effective way. Give your Sorcerer some sort of effective melee weapon. I can use the glaive, as I have a half-elf with a high-elf heritage, but if you just have base Sorcerer, you can still use a fairly effective dagger, like Assassin's Touch here, and you will get some good damage out of it. Generally speaking, in a lot of situations, a melee swipe is going to do more for you than just popping off a cantrip. Not always, of course, they do get more powerful as you level up, but it can be very useful in a pinch, especially when you use the extra abilities that a lot of the weapons do give you, and a lot of the extra effects that go on. Sorrow here lets me Sorrowful Lash, bonus target once per turn, which is really, really nice. Pull extra damage and all of that good stuff. So definitely do that. On top of the fact that we can blur ourselves and Blade Ward, meaning that we are becoming very hard to kill in close range. We've got decent health thanks to being draconic. We are now advantaged on all of the attacks against us, and we can do some nice little stabbing in melee. Blade Ward on top of it too, and then if we're hasted as well, we can do double attacks per turn instead of having to waste off spell slots, and it just really helps out to be able to not be made out of paper and contribute more than just your spells. But when you do cast your spells, make sure they do contribute. It is very tempting to go into battle, immediately launch off 2 fireballs, haha, I've just obliterated that group of enemies, whoa, and now you're out of level 3 spell slots. for the rest of the day, and now you have to go long rest if you want to use them in your next battle, and the rest of the enemies you didn't just kill with 2 fireballs are still alive, and oh. So what's more effective? Blasting off 2 fireballs or giving your guys 10 turns of double turns? It's less flashy, but it's more power per spell slot over the course of the encounter, and that's something to keep in mind. A lot of the time, you will find that pure damage isn't really the best use case for each spell slot. You want more the utility that you can get over more turns that has more worthwhile. Sometimes you will just need to magic missile that guy that has to die you can't afford to miss, and then go for it. But don't just kind of mindlessly blast. And of course, as an extension to meta magic, we can regenerate a spell slot by spending sorcery points instead of meta magic. So if I want my level 2 back, well, and there we go. Cool, we've got another level 2 back. But let's say I want sorcery points. Let me give up a level 2 slot, and now I can use Quickened Spell again. Cool, and yes, Quickened Spell to double buff is really good. Quickened Spell, blur yourself, and then magic missile something is nice in combination where you need to set up both defense and offense at the same time, and you can't afford to wait turns because you're in a difficult encounter. So really keep that on the back burner for either burst damage or burst defensive. It gets the job done. And because we are Draconic Heritage, our armor class will always be at least 13 if we're not wearing armor. Which means, ironically, if I put on this light armor that has 2 extra AC compared to just the clothes I'm wearing, well, I actually lose AC because of Draconic Heritage. So what you want to do is deliberately just choose some normal clothes that have a good effect. Gaining Wrath here is really nice. Or, for example, Robe of Summer, if I ever go against anything with cold damage, now I'm just resistance to it, and I don't pay AC to actually make that happen. And it's quite a cool looking piece of gear too. So don't just go whacking on all of the armor you find that you can equip, because oftentimes it's actually going to make you weaker, not stronger. Other than that, just kind of general stuff applies. Don't stand in the middle of a load of enemies, don't waste your spells, don't run into a place that you're going to get pushed off a ledge, just common kind of RPG turn-based gaming sense, and that's about that. Now, deliberately misty stepping offensively to end up on top of a group of enemies, so you now can very close range. Yeah, that is quite good, and you can get very aggressive with a Draconic Sorcerer. As I said, you don't have to just sit in the back, but they are a few of the general tips and tricks that I would give you on top of, you know, the full level 1 through 5 spell breakdown, what's good, what isn't. A lot of testing and playtime has gone into this, both from Baldurs Gate and D&D itself, so I hope you do have found all this useful. Do have found? And if you have, or indeed at least enjoyed this whole experience, please like if so, subscribe for plenty more Baldurs Gate 3 on many more classes and all the game has to offer, as we try our best to be your companion number 5 through your journey here on the channel. For now then, consider supporting the future of said channel on Patreon down below if you're that way inclined. It does keep us going and it does mean the world. And until we meet again, a goodbye.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.